How do you build the fastest steam locomotive in history and then end up erasing it from memory? In the 1930s Germany, a team of engineers was ordered to create a machine so streamlined and radical it would slash drag by 30% and outpace every rival on Earth. This was prestige science, built at the regime's command, its speed record still unbeaten by conventional steam. But those aerodynamic curves are missing from history for a reason. What drove them to push steam to the breaking point? And why did their masterpiece vanish almost overnight? The answer begins with a forgotten design brief that would change everything. The design team at Borsig faced a single, radical mandate: create a steam locomotive that could rival the speed and glamour of the new diesel and electric trains capturing headlines across Europe. Their answer was a machine that looked like nothing else on the rails, a locomotive sheathed from nose to tender in a continuous, gleaming steel shell. Every visible surface was sculpted for airflow, with the boiler, running gear, and even the tender hidden behind curved, riveted panels. The goal was not just beauty, but measurable advantage. According to calculations from the era, streamlining at this scale could cut aerodynamic drag by as much as 30% at high speeds, a figure drawn from wind tunnel work and real-world tests on similar German projects. For the engineers, these numbers were more than theory. They meant the difference between steam's survival and its eclipse. The shell's geometry was the product of months of aerodynamic study. The nose was rounded and sloped, designed to part the air cleanly at 175 kilometers per hour, a speed that, on paper, would let the DRG Class 05 overtake the celebrated diesel expresses on the Berlin to Hamburg corridor. Along the flanks, side panels dropped nearly to the rails, enclosing the driving wheels and motion to prevent turbulence and dust. Even the tender was faired to match, forming a single aerodynamic unit. Every hatch and seam was minimized. Inspection doors were kept to the bare minimum the maintenance crews would accept. Underneath, the frame bristled with hidden brackets and supports, all engineered to hold the casing rigid at speed. For the Reichsbahn's technical staff, this was more than a styling exercise. At 140 kilometers per hour, the calculations suggested the streamlined casing could save nearly 400 horsepower at the drawbar compared to a conventional express engine. That meant less coal burned, more sustained speed, and a fighting chance to keep steam competitive in the new era of high-speed rail. The design brief called for scheduled service at 175 kilometers per hour, a figure that placed the Class 05 at the very edge of what steam technology could deliver. The engineers knew the risks. Streamlining added weight and complexity, and every panel removed for inspection could become a liability in day-to-day service. But the promise of speed and the prestige that came with it outweighed the doubts. In the 1930s, in the world of rail innovation, the DRG-05's shell was a wager that with enough calculation, enough steel, and enough nerve, steam could still win the race. In the 1930s, Germany treated speed as more than a technical goal. It was a national project. The Reichsbahn's pursuit of the Streamliner was never just about overtaking rival locomotives. It was part of a wider campaign to craft a new image of German modernity, orchestrated under a regime obsessed with spectacle. The DRG BR-05-002 appeared alongside the Autobahn, the 1936 Berlin Olympics, and giant airships, each staged as proof that the country had left behind defeat and stagnation. Newspapers and newsreels carried images of the locomotive in motion, its steel shell gleaming under banners and flags. Headlines boasted of world records and technological triumphs, feeding a narrative of resurgence that the state was eager to broadcast both at home and abroad. The regime's appetite for prestige technology shaped every public aspect of the 0502. Press runs were carefully managed, with selected journalists and photographers invited to witness the machine at speed. The locomotive's record-breaking run in May 1936 was celebrated not only as an engineering achievement, but as a symbol of national prowess, with coverage coordinated to maximize its impact. The streamlined shell itself became a motif in posters and promotional material, a visual shorthand for progress and power. Yet beneath the headlines, the reality of the project was more complex. The commission for the Class 05 came from the Reichsbahn's technical leadership, who saw the need to defend steam's reputation as diesel and electric trains gained ground. While the propaganda ministry seized on the results, there is no surviving directive that shows Goebbels or Hitler ordering its construction. The locomotive's role as a propaganda object was opportunistic, a technical initiative pressed into service as a political symbol. This alignment of engineering ambition and nationalist expectation created a tension that followed the Doro 5 throughout its life. The locomotive was built to dazzle, to offer a vision of the future in steel and steam. But it was also a product of a dictatorship that valued image as much as substance. The ethical line is difficult to draw. The Borsig works where 0502 was assembled did not yet rely on forced labor in the mid-1930s, though like many German factories, it would later become entangled in the war economy. For the 05, the context matters. It was designed and built before the regime's worst crimes, but it rolled out onto rails, already shaped by exclusion and propaganda. The DRG BR 05002 stands as both a technical milestone and a reminder of the ways power can shape, showcase, and ultimately discard even the most advanced machines. Its story is inseparable from the regime that used it as a symbol and from the uneasy legacy that followed. On the morning of May 11, 1936, a train unlike any other waited on the Berlin to Hamburg main line. The DRG BR 05002 stood at the head of a stripped-down consist, 3 lightweight express coaches and a dynamometer car, assembled with one purpose: to chase a number that had never appeared on a steam locomotive speedometer. The test section between Vieznitz and Paulinenaue was chosen for its flat, ruler-straight track, a stretch of iron slicing through the Prignitz marshes, cleared and reserved for this singular attempt. There were no banners at the starting post, no crowd of dignitaries on the platform. Only a handful of officials, technical observers, and silent railwaymen watched as the signal dropped. The crew, driver, and fireman, names lost to the archives, brought the 0502 to life, coaxing steam from the high-pressure boiler, feeding coal to the firebox, and watching the pressure gauges climb. The locomotive's streamlined shell, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected the pale May sky as the train began to move, gathering speed with each passing kilometer. Inside the dynamometer car, instruments traced every second onto a paper roll: speed, drawbar pull, acceleration, all measured with the best precision the Reichsbahn's engineers could muster. The locomotive surged past 100, then 150, then 175 kilometers per hour. The shell cut the air cleanly, the only sound a rising note of wind and steel. At kilometer 52, the needle swept past 200.4 kilometers per hour, 124.5 miles per hour. For a brief moment, 0502 became the fastest steam locomotive on Earth. Word traveled quickly. Technical journals and newspapers ran the figures, and the Reichsbahn issued a statement confirming the result. The record had been measured by both onboard and lineside timing. The route had been checked for accuracy, and the train's weight kept deliberately low to give the machine its best chance. The press, primed for spectacle, seized on the number. They did not linger on the missing roll of dynamometer paper or the anonymity of the crew. The hero of the day was the locomotive itself, a steel shape built to turn a nation's ambition into fact, if only for a few measured kilometers. The real secret behind the BR-05002's record-setting run lay beneath its polished shell, a convergence of steam technology pushed to the edge of what was possible in the 1930s. At the heart of the locomotive stood a high-pressure boiler, operating at 20 bar, a figure that dwarfed the standards of most express engines of its day. This immense pressure fed 3 cylinders, each precisely balanced to deliver smooth, continuous power, at speeds most steam locomotives could only dream of. The triple-cylinder layout was not chosen for simplicity. It was a deliberate strategy to tame the violent forces unleashed at 175 kilometers per hour and above, distributing the load across the driving wheels and reducing the hammer blow that threatened both track and machinery. The boiler itself was a feat of engineering, with a vast firebox and a superheater system designed to wring every last calorie from the burning coal. Superheated steam, hotter and drier than the saturated vapor of older designs, coursed through the cylinders, raising thermal efficiency and allowing the engine to sustain nearly 2,500 kilowatts, about 3,350 horsepower at full tilt. This was not just about brute force. The metallurgy of the pressure vessel, the rods and the wheels, had to withstand stresses that pushed the limits of available steel. Every component, from the rivets holding the boiler plates to the bearings on the driving axles, was selected or fabricated to survive the relentless punishment of high-speed running. Balancing the rotating and reciprocating masses became a science of its own. Engineers calculated counterweights and crank angles with obsessive care, seeking the elusive equilibrium that would keep the locomotive steady at speed. Even the running gear, hidden behind the streamlined panels, was a study in precision, designed to minimize vibration and ensure that the power generated in the firebox translated into motion without waste or destructive resonance. The technical anatomy of BR-05002 was a blend of ambition and discipline, every detail tuned for that fleeting moment when the speedometer needle swept past 200 kilometers per hour. Yet the very qualities that made the locomotive a marvel, its pressure, its complexity, its demand for perfect balance, would soon reveal themselves as burdens, especially when the time came to keep the machine running day after day. For now, though, the engineering stood alone, a testament to how far steam could be pushed when nothing was held back. In the maintenance sheds of Hamburg Altona, the BR-05002 quickly lost its aura of invincibility. What looked like a seamless shell on the outside became a daily test of patience for the workshop staff. Every inspection, every routine lubrication meant wrestling with heavy steel panels, some bolted, some hinged, all designed with aerodynamics in mind, not the hands of mechanics. The Reichsbahn's own repair crews grumbled about the hours lost just to reach the motion gear or check the bearings. Simple jobs that took minutes on a standard express engine could stretch into hours. The streamlined casing, meant to keep the wind at bay, also trapped heat around the cylinders and running gear. On summer days, temperatures under the metal skins soared, leaving crews to work in stifling conditions and raising the risk of overheated bearings and cooked lubricants. Soot and cinders, once swept away by open air, now collected in hidden corners, turning every inspection into a search for grime and corrosion. The locomotive service records show a pattern: more shop time, more unscheduled stops, and a growing backlog of small faults that would have been trivial on a BR-01. Mechanics began cutting extra access panels, unofficial modifications that chipped away at the purity of the original design. By the late 1930s, even the most enthusiastic fitters had stopped pretending the shell was anything but a burden. Still, the Reichsbahn kept the BR-05002 in its full streamlined dress throughout the war. Perhaps out of pride, perhaps because the effort to strip it down was judged too disruptive when every resource was stretched thin. The complaints from the pit never made headlines, But in the day-to-day reality of railway operation, the dream of effortless speed was paid for in sweat, burns, and wasted hours. The shell that once promised the future now stood between the locomotive and the practical demands of the present. In September 1939, the outbreak of war swept away the world. The DRG-BR 05002 had been built to serve. The Reichsbahn's luxury express trains were suspended as the network became a lifeline for troop movements, military supplies, and wartime logistics. The high-speed FD services between Berlin and Hamburg, the very runs for which the 05s had been designed, vanished almost overnight. The streamlined locomotives, once the pride of the fleet, found themselves reassigned to more routine passenger duties, their speed and spectacle now irrelevant in a system running at the edge of capacity. Railway management faced new realities that left little room for technical showpieces. Wartime priorities demanded reliability, ease of repair, and standardization above all else. Specialized high-maintenance engines, like the 05002, became liabilities. Resources for upkeep grew scarce, and the focus shifted to classes that could be serviced quickly and run interchangeably. Even as the 05s continued to operate, their unique features became less a badge of honor and more a maintenance burden that the workshops struggled to justify. When peace returned, the newly formed Deutsche Bundesbahn confronted a battered rail network and a changed technological landscape. The post-war years brought a decisive policy shift. Diesel and electric traction were now the future of mainline expresses. The Deutsche Bundesbahn standardization drive left little space for experimental steam relics. In 1950, as part of a sweeping overhaul, the remaining streamlining was stripped from 05001 and 05002 at Krauss-Maffei. Boiler pressure was reduced, and the locomotives were rebuilt to match the new standard, their original identity erased in the name of practicality. The dream of a high-speed steam flagship had become a casualty of war, policy, and the relentless march of technological change. By the time the 1950s arrived, the DRG-BR 05002 had become a relic in a world that no longer needed it. At Krauss-Maffei, the last traces of its streamlined identity were stripped away. The once glossy shell, designed for speed and spectacle, was dismantled piece by piece, replaced with exposed machinery and practical fittings. The boiler pressure, once set at a daring 20 bar, was reduced to 16 bar. What returned to service was a locomotive that looked almost ordinary, shorn of the futuristic casing that once made it a symbol of ambition and modernity. The post-war Deutsche Bundesbahn had little use for technological outliers. Standardization and ease of maintenance mattered more than aerodynamic dreams. The 0502, now bearing the scars of wartime neglect and stripped of its outer skin, continued to haul express trains for a few more years, workmanlike, anonymous, no longer the subject of headlines. In 1958, it was withdrawn from service. By 1960, it had been cut up for scrap, its parts scattered, its story nearly lost. Only one of the three, 05001, escaped this fate. During the early 1960s, preservationists at the DB Museum in Nuremberg undertook a cosmetic restoration. They recreated the streamlined shell using surviving drawings and fragments to rebuild a shape that had once promised the future. Today, 0501 stands in the museum, silent and polished, a ghost of the era when speed records were a matter of national pride. The 0502, by contrast, survives only in photographs and scattered technical records. Its erasure was almost complete, the memory of its record-setting run fading as the world embraced diesel and electric power. The museum's role became more than just preservation. It became an act of remembering what ambition looked like and what was lost when technology outran its time. In the end, the streamlined shell that once defined the 0502 exists only as a memory. Its steel sacrificed for a world that had moved on. Innovation always races ahead of what society is ready and willing to use. As high-speed rail transforms travel worldwide, the lessons from the 05002 remain urgent. Technology alone can't outpace the world's priorities and politics. In every breakthrough, we risk repeating the same paradox, brilliance sidelined by circumstance. Sometimes, the future arrives too soon, and history quietly leaves it behind. What possibilities are we missing today?